After more than a year of controversy since the start of the national anthem, I guess fiasco is what I'm calling it, the NFL has now passed a new policy which will mandate that all NFL football players on the field, as well as team personnel, stand during the national anthem. And if you don't want to stand, you can be in the locker room during the anthem. But if you're on the field and you don't stand, you will be fined by the league. The teams can also set up their own fine structures in addition to the league fines. All NFL team owners who voted approved this rule. We know that at least the San Francisco 49ers, where this sort of started, right, with Colin Kaepernick, the 49ers abstained from voting one way or the other, and we don't know how many teams in total abstained, but nobody voted against it. And it's actually more than just standing during the anthem. The rule, as written now, says that players and personnel must show respect to the anthem. And if you sit or kneel, that's definitely disrespect, but it could conceivably extend to other actions. So let's break this down. Question one, very simple question. Can the NFL do this? Is there anything illegal about this? Absolutely not. It's an organization with a handbook, and one of the rules can be you got to stand, you can't sit nor kneel during the anthem. If you do, you will be fined. Can the players choose to ignore the rule and be fined? Of course, right? They are absolutely free to kneel if they want to, but with financial consequences, which they might decide are worth it to them in order to make a point. The problem here is, number one, yet again, we're talking about either the criminalization or, in this case, the penalization of nonviolent speech and what we call nonviolent protests, right? Yes, the NFL can say that the field, which is sort of like the office of sorts for the players, is not the place for those types of protests. And I'm not arguing with that. Of course they can do that, and they did. But it is now yet another place where you get in trouble for peacefully, and in this case, silently, taking politically active actions. And even their statement that if you want to protest, you can stay off the field in the locker room. You're hiding the protests so that no one notices them, right? If you're Tom Brady and you're not on the field because you're protesting the anthem, I guess people will notice. On a team of 50-something football players, if you're a random second stringer defensive back or something, and you remain in the locker room during the anthem, does anybody notice? Of course not. And that's the entire point, right? And then lastly, and this is a really complex path to go down, because the policy as it's currently been described is you can't disrespect the anthem, which includes sitting or kneeling. What about facing away from the flag, right? What if you stand, but you're the one person who, when you're about to have the national anthem played, takes 2 steps forward and then turns your back to where the flag is? Is that disrespect? You're not sitting, you're not kneeling, you're on the field and you're standing there silently, but you're facing the other way. And if it isn't respectful, who decides, right? Does the league decide? Does the team decide? Do other players decide? Or does Donald Trump in a tweet decide what's respectful? So the NFL is obviously completely within their legal rights to do this, and I'm totally against it, and I think it's horrible. But I think that the undertone here is one of total subjectivity with regard to disrespect. It is yet another one of these cases where you're taking an act that started, right? What started this whole thing? Exposing racial inequality, right? Protesting racial inequality has triggered a bunch of rich team owners to say we're going to make it more difficult to do that. So I think that this is absolutely despicable. One good guy in all of this is the CEO of the New York Jets. Imagine me, Pat, a Patriots fan, praising the Jets. Chris Johnson says that he's going to pay the fines for any players who want to protest on the field, saying, I do not like imposing any club-specific rules. If somebody on the Jets takes a knee, that fine will be borne by the organization, by me, not the players. I never want to put restrictions on the speech of our players. Do I prefer that they stand? Of course. But I understand if they felt the need to protest. There are some big, complicated issues that we're all struggling with, and our players are on the front lines. I don't want to come down on them like a ton of bricks, and I won't. There will be no club fines or suspensions of any sort or any sort of repercussions. If the team gets fined, that's something I'll have to bear. That's the right answer. The New York Jets, the guidepost on this issue here, coming from a Patriots fan, I think that this is an absolutely despicable rule, and I am not questioning the NFL's right to do it. But I think this is absolutely horrible.
I think it will effectively end the kneeling protest because
You think it will?
protests have to be out in public. If it's in a locker room, no one's going to notice. No one's going to give any attention to it.
It's like a free speech zone.
It's,
in a
it's
sense.
exactly like having a free speech zone. I mean,
Yeah.
think back to like the 1968 Olympics where there was those two black runners who came, I think, in first and third place in their race.
Yeah.
And they stood there and they gave the Black Power salute. There was an image of that. It went all around the globe, and that was like an active form of protesting.
Yeah.
This kind of like this was like the same thing in a different way, right?
It's like saying do that, but in the locker room. John Carlos and the other guy do it in the locker room. If you want to do that, that's totally fine. But you got to do it in the locker room where there's no camera and nobody's going to notice it. So I am completely opposed to this, but I am not. I want to be super clear. The NFL can do this, and we can obviously decide whether or not we want to keep watching football or keep attending games or whatever the case may be. I am not convinced that this is the end of the kneeling protests, or at least let me put it a different way. I'm not convinced it's the end of the anthem protests. I just am not yet sure sort of what form they will take, and I think that the turning your back is an interesting one, which at least seems to stick to the letter of what the new rule is.